Welcome everyone to tonight's asset protection webinar. We are excited to have Clint Coons with us. Clint has been a friend of our organization for years and years and years. A lot of you get confused and think that we are Anderson. We're not. We're clearly a very separate company, but love Clint's relationship. I love his knowledge. I don't know of a attorney in the nation that is more grounded in asset protection, estate planning, income taxes, who's a real estate investor, who's a stock market investor, who kind of gets the whole picture. And we're really excited about the topic tonight. Before we turn time over to him, reminder that for those of you that are just joining us, this is a webinar series that's been going on for close to a decade. We've had a couple really good experts, and we've got a tremendous calendar throughout the year planned. But we had Mike Koval on a few weeks ago. We had Scott Estold, former senior trial attorney from the IRS, on talking about tax planning under the new administration. He'll conclude a lot of what he taught in that webinar. He'll conclude that at the summit. And then we've got Jill Banner, CEO of iPlan Group. It's a custodian group that does, they do 401ks, they do mainly self-directed IRAs, and where she's managing thousands of accounts, we've asked her to talk about what the wealthy people are doing right now, or the really creative people in their trust accounts. She can't tell you specific who's doing what, but she can say, here's where the money is moving, and here's the people that are making money. So we're excited about that. And those of you, a big number of people I see that are on this call are already registered for the 3-day Asset Protection Summit. This will be a live event that starts it's a Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday class. It's February 22nd, 23rd, 24th. No, you don't have to get on an airplane. We're excited to do this as a live stream event. We've got an incredible lineup of speakers. Not all of them that are shown here. There's Clint, Stacy Acevedo, Gene Guarino will make a live appearance. Scott Estel. We've got Robert Sheeman here. We've got an amazing lineup. So hope you join us for that. If you're interested, you would visit us at protectwealth.com and sign up for it. The agenda has now been posted. Kendall, I think I sent it to you yesterday. Has the new agenda been posted? I guess I should have asked you before.
Yeah, it has. Yep, you're good to go.
Okay, so protectwealth.com, and anyway, new agenda. Here's who's speaking. It doesn't give you specific times of the speakers, because we tend to like to roll a little bit and be able to be a little bit flexible in answering questions. So I don't know exactly when everyone will speak, but there's the agenda for the 3 days, and you'll notice that it's a substantial agenda. We're going to cover a lot of topics. So, and then lastly, before we turn time over to Clint, anything, because we're talking legal, because we're talking taxes, anything related to this event is for informational only. We encourage you to seek out a professional whenever you're dealing with this. Not every principle that we teach is going to apply to you. We're going to teach general principles. We'll be very, very clear, as clear as we can be, but not everything applies to you, which is why we'd like to spend as much time with you at the summit and sign up for personal consults as you can. So with that, Clint, I'm so excited about this topic. As I mentioned to Kendall before, one of the biggest hurdles that Californians and people from Massachusetts, some of the states that have really high filing fees, one of the biggest hurdles they have is the cost of doing asset protection. You got 5 rentals. Does that mean I need 5 LLCs and 5 $800 filing fees? And Clint has some really, really great ideas, and we appreciate you being on, Clint. And we're excited about the summit coming up too. But teach us what you were teaching me the other day. I'm really excited about. Um, well, I won't burst
How
your
all this works?
how it works. Yep, show us.
Let me share my screen here. All right. Just take a minute to come up. Do you see it?
Not yet. Let's see here.
There
Oh,
we
there it
go.
goes. Yep, you're good.
All right, so it states California because it's one of the more egregious states, but this concept applies across the board in all 50 states, and it's something that you'd want to monitor that I'm going to be sharing with you to see whether or not you could benefit from this discussion with your own planning. And a little bit about Anderson before we get started. If you're not familiar with this, I mean, I assume if you've been going to the summits, which I hope you are, because there's such a tremendous amount of information that gets conveyed. And the thing that's different about the summit is that it's always relevant. Okay. People can give you accurate information, but they're not giving you relevant information about what is actually occurring right now. And I teach on asset protection at the summit. I have a bent towards real estate focus, although we do talk about other assets. So I'm not going to limit it just to that. But what I bring to it is experience from my own investing and that of our clients. Since we have so many clients across the country, and we work, with individuals in all 50 states and in multiple countries, showing them how to protect their assets, what you're actually receiving is information based upon what's going on in today's market. There's a lot of people out there that, they may be book smart and they teach you what they learned by reading a textbook or listening to someone else. But that is a lot different than learning from individuals like who will be at the summit that are actually doing it. And that's what I find for a lot of people who have not attended the summit before. That's their aha moment. They're like, I couldn't figure out how you put A and B together to get to C, because every time I did what somebody else told me, I ended up on F and I failed. Well, it's because the individuals that were teaching you oftentimes were not doing what they were teaching. And that is why you should be there, to learn from individuals like myself, avid investor, just closed this at the end of last week on a 45 multi-unit building, and the week before closed on a 140 unit property. So I'm putting the same deals together that I'm encouraging my clients to put together, the people that listen to us, and I'm showing you how to do it from my perspective, the way I've been able to do it. So definitely want to be there. But Anderson, a little bit about us. We were formed in '99. The whole premise of forming Anderson was to help individuals, investors, stock market investors, small business owners, anybody with assets, protect them. Because I grew up in a family of real estate investors, and I saw what happens when you're not adequately protected and you're receiving advice from attorneys that are family members that really don't understand what it is you're doing. And they're just parroting something that they've heard or telling you just to load up on insurance. At Anderson, our approach is way different than that. We're looking at things from a tax standpoint. That's why we have a tax division inside of our firm. I mean, heck, we have now over 300 employees with Anderson. They're both attorneys, tax preparers, professionals, bookkeepers, strategists, lending specialists, and it's all designed towards helping our clients, improve their game, move the ball down the field, reach that end zone, be able to retire with the income that they were planning on, and they have their assets there for them at that point in time. And that's really been my motivation from the outset, is to not only help our clients, but I want to get there as well. And so I have that end date for me, and I want to make sure when that time comes and I'm ready to hang it up. Like a buddy of mine just called me up. He's 67. He's finally closing the practice down. He's been a bankruptcy trustee. He's done really well for himself. I don't want to wait till 67. And whatever I can do to get there as soon as possible, I've been focusing on that. Okay. So let's talk about this event. So what the hell's the problem, right? Why are you here? Well, for a lot of individual investors, especially those in California and some other states, the problem when it comes to investing is that many entities that we need to protect ourselves from all the various lawsuits. And I'm not here to go through all the different ways you can be sued. In fact, I'm not even going to cover that here. Come to the summit and I will tell you how many ways you can be screwed. I mean, sued by someone else. And many times it's for things, you didn't even do wrong, or you didn't even realize you were doing something wrong. That's a different issue. The problem that I find is that there's the states put a lot of barriers in place to stop people from putting together sound asset protection plans to preserve their assets by the fees they charge to create the entities and maintain the entities. I remember when I first started practicing with my partner, Toby, we used to do a lot of work in Nevada. And at that point in time, Nevada was a great state because they gave you anonymity, and you could use a nominee officer or director for your corporation or your LLC, a manager, and the fees to set up an entity were a couple $100. That was it. And it was a boon for Nevada. They brought in a ton of business, especially from California and all these other states. People were flocking there because it was such a business-friendly state. I mean, it's no different now, right? You see a lot of people moving from California, going to Texas and Florida and other states because they're tired of the state saying, oh, you made $10? Well, we're going to take 12. Okay, it's like, do you stop? It's death by 1,000 toothpicks is what it becomes. So Nevada had this great thing going, and then political winds shifted, and you saw what was going on in the state. It started to become more blue, is what I was going to say, and they started targeting the very individuals that were making them money. And they decided to increase the fees on their corporations, their LLCs, and they brought it up to over $750, basically, to have a corporation with all these with a new tax and new filing fees. And when we're trying to argue against it, they kept saying, no, people will still continue to do business here. Well, that didn't happen. And as a result of it, people do what people are going to do. They shifted away from that state, and we shifted to Wyoming. In fact, we opened up an office in Wyoming and started setting up Wyoming entities because Wyoming gets it. And they realize that by having a jurisdiction that is favorable to set up business entities, you set it up, they're going to come. And that's what's occurred. So we've actually been moving our clients over the years out of Nevada into Wyoming. In fact, Nevada realized the problem they were having. They thought they were going to continue to grow. Instead, it started shrinking. And they realized, oh, we made a mistake. Let's lower some of the fees now on these entities. Hey, man, that horse has left the barn. And I don't think they're ever going to catch it again and bring it back in, because they already started a mass exodus. And this is what goes on with the mentality of states, where they come in and they want to tax people where they're already getting paid taxes. They don't need to double it up and triple it up on individuals. And so that becomes a problem, especially when you want to protect your assets. And in California, I'm going to hit on that. Let me just show you what happens. If you want a limited liability company in California to hold a rental property, and you set it up as a disregarded entity, so there isn't a federal tax return you have to file. It all passes right to you. You pay taxes on your 1040. You pay taxes in California on your state income tax return on all the income you generated in that LLC, but that's not enough. Because you have an LLC, they're going to charge you a minimum of $800. And the tax is on gross income. So if you have a limited liability company, let's say you're flipping real estate in California, and you flip one house and you make $1,001 on the flip of that house, profit wise, I mean, it sounds like a lot of money, but your profit is only $75,000. Well, then they're going to tax you on that gross income, and you're going to pay $6,000 for the privilege of flipping that property in an LLC. And that's going to flow down to you as well. And you're going to pay tax at the individual level. So that's been a problem for individuals. Corporations in California, for instance, they pay tax on the net income. A C corporation is taxed at 8.84%. And so many states have something similar to this. S corporations are taxed at 1.5%. Limited partnerships, that's another entity that people will use. In California, if it's disregarded, it doesn't have to pay tax. But otherwise it will pay tax, and that it pays a flat tax of $800. So these fees become problems. And so what you should be doing, of course, when it comes to an asset protection structure, this would be the approach I would take, and what I advocate and what I'll be teaching at the summit, is you should be taking and set up one limited liability company per property. Protect each of your homes. Now, I know some of you are watching this, you're thinking, well, Clint, that's kind of ridiculous. Why would I want to do that when I can just buy insurance and protect myself with an insurance? Well, when you come to the summit, I'll show you why the insurance isn't going to protect you, number one. But number two, why do you want to lose everything? So we want to protect it. Use everything that's available to us. And if you have LLCs and you can put one house in an LLC, great. And so a lot of people want to utilize this strategy, say in California, but here's the problem. The state's going to charge you a minimum of $800 a year. So that's $4,000 a year to protect 5 houses. And then some individuals, they don't even want their information made publicly available. And they follow a strategy that, again, we recommend, which is to create a Wyoming limited liability company to own all their LLCs. And that's another $800 because California takes a position. If you create a limited liability company and you live in that state, and it doesn't matter if that LLC is located on Mars, right? Let's say it's engaged in mining operations on Mars. Oh no, because you live in California, you're doing business in California. So they have the privilege of taxing that company. As Don stated, it'd be great if somebody would actually challenge this and had the pockets to go after it. But the problem is the government, they have deep pockets, or what they tend to do is they tend to settle. They don't want a favorable ruling. This is one of the areas of the law that a lot of people do not realize, is that when a government institution or even a state institution, when it realizes it's on the wrong side of something, but they want to still continue to push that policy, they will pick their battles and they will choose to settle rather than allow it to go to trial and have an unfavorable ruling handed down against them, because then it has lasting implications against everybody else. They know not everyone else has the deep enough pockets to go after them. I used to see it in law school where somebody challenged the University of Washington for discrimination. When she applied to the UW Law School, she was not admitted, even though she was within the top 2% or 1% that year on the LSAT score, and she had a 3.7 GPA or something like that, because they said she was overrepresented in that entering class. And she ended up suing, but they settled. Never went to court, and they paid her the difference between that law school education and the private education through Seattle University, where I met her. And it really upset me because this is the problem. States have that ability to do this. Come in, offer you a big check, you go away, you take it, and then everyone that's behind you, they're going to still be stuck in that situation, and they won't have any resolution because they have no one to pay to defend them. So in California, you've got this problem right here where they hit you for $800 per entity. And so what people end up doing when you're in a state that comes and extracts this type of money from you, you adopt this approach. And so you're like, all right, well, rather than pay $4,000 a year, I'm going to put all of my properties or 5 properties in one limited liability company. And you think you have protection. Well, you have some protection, but you know that if something goes wrong with that structure, what have you risked? If one of those properties ends up in a lawsuit, somebody's suing, then you've just risked all of your assets in that limited liability company. So there's 5 homes. And think on this, you know, when you're first getting started, maybe you've been investing for a while, you have a portfolio of 5 properties. And this is something that I don't think a lot of people understand, is that when you have a portfolio of 5, 10, or 15 properties, you're in a much different situation than somebody that has like myself. I have a portfolio close to over 170 properties. So let me ask you, who has more to lose, right? Now, most people think this. They think that I have more to lose than the person that has 10, 15 properties. Well, actually, it's quite the opposite. And here's why. Because when I structure things, I can easily, if I wanted to, group 15 properties per LLC. So a lawsuit like this hits, I lose 15 properties. Okay. I have 155 more to continue to pay me income. But you got that one real estate investor, they've worked hard, struggled to get 15 properties to provide education for their kids, to send them to school, and then produce retirement income. One lawsuit takes you back down to 0. And you have 0 income coming in. So it's kind of counterintuitive that you think as you grow more, you've got more to risk. No, you can risk more because the way you can compartmentalize your risk, you have less to lose. Whereas in an individual, when you're starting out, you have more to lose because it accounts for more of your wealth, more of your income. And this is a trap that I hear professionals tell people all the time. They don't look at it from that point of view. And so these mistakes just compound themselves. So what then is the solution to all of this? Well, the solution is to find something, an entity that will, A, protect yourself, allow you to set it up, protect your assets, protect your real estate so that if anything goes wrong, you've minimized your total risk exposure to the least extent as possible. But at the same time, use a solution that the states aren't going to come in and nickel and dime you and hit you with these exorbitant fees to set up a structure that provides asset protection. Now, one of the tools that we use here at Anderson to provide this type of protection, especially for California residents, is referred to as the Wyoming Statutory Trust. Now, you may or may not be aware of this. Some of you may be aware of a Delaware Statutory Trust. That's a very popular form of holding real estate or securitizing different types of investments. And I think it was in 1988, Delaware came up with the first Statutory Trust Act. I mean, it's akin to a business trust, and business trusts have been around for hundreds of years. In fact, when this country was started initially, business trusts were a more common form of owning assets than corporations were. And that had to do with the limitations they placed on corporations. Corporations, when we first started out in this country, couldn't own real estate. So people would create a business trust to own real estate. Corporations were limited to how many shareholders they have and what they could engage in on a business level and how long they could last. Trusts didn't have those problems. So trusts have been around for a really long time, and states have codified their laws around trusts. You've heard of the Massachusetts Business Trust. Okay, there you go. There's a form of a trust that's codified. Well, Delaware created this trust act, and whenever a state drafts an act or puts together a statute that, offers some benefits to people, other states want to get in on the game as well because they realize business will flock there. And in Delaware, a lot of business has gone there for real estate transactions and for securitization of investments. On the real estate side, it's been because of 1031 exchange treatment. That, let's say you sell a house, you can roll that gain under a 1031 into an interest in a trust that holds a investment in commercial real estate. That qualifies for a 1031 exchange treatment. IRS has already ruled on this, and it's permissible as long as you create the trust in a very specific manner. That you couldn't roll property, the gain on the sale of a house, into the stock market. You couldn't roll it into an LLC or into a C corporation or into a REIT. None of those qualify. But a statutory trust, it does qualify if it's set up the right way. And so this is what's really given a lot of spurred the growth in this country, utilizing this tool to own real estate. And when I first got interested and I started researching it, I was surprised how much real estate is held by statutory trusts. In fact, where I live in Washington State, in a town called Belfair, where my mother-in-law lives out in that area of Washington, there's a big CVS pharmacy owned by a statutory trust. Who would have known? You would have figured that when you drive by that CVS pharmacy, that commercial property would have been owned by an LLC. And in fact, it's owned by a trust. And I started looking at this in state after state after state and realized, hey, there's something going on here. I mean, if you just look at the headlines, here's a Kiplinger, passive real estate investing with the Delaware Statutory Trust, a DST. And many times these are all syndications. JLL fully subscribes its DST. See, that's what it means by that. It's a syndication. Class A medical office building, January 25th, 2021, purchased in a DST in Nevada. This JLL, January 14th, 2021, for Phoenix Apartments. See, this stuff is going on all around us. 36 million, 1031 exchange amid COVID pandemic in California into a Delaware statutory trust. So these are being used extensively now to take down larger projects. Now, I'm not going to talk about a Delaware statutory trust. I'm going to talk about a Wyoming statutory trust because I'm not trying to take down larger projects. We're not trying to syndicate. What we're doing is we want to protect our own assets. In fact, here's a California corporate and securities law blog that talks about the use of Delaware statutory trusts in California, and that it's becoming, more of a popular way of holding real estate there. So this trust provides a lot of protection, as you'll see here, provides asset protection. So it's like a limited liability company or a corporation. That is, when you set it up, you got to file it with the state. You set up this entity and it's registered with the state, and then you're going to foreign file it in the state in which you're going to own your real estate. And so when you set it up in this manner, because you're forming it with the state, you're given certain protections that come from having that. Let me show you an example of a Wyoming statute. So in Wyoming statute 1723-105 of the Wyoming Statutory Trust Act, it states here that, beneficial owners shall be entitled to personal liability extended to shareholders of corporations or limited liability companies organized under the Wyoming LLC Act. So if I were to translate that for you, it means this. If you set up a Wyoming statutory trust and you're the owner, you're what's called a beneficiary. If you set up a corporation and you're the owner, you're called a shareholder. You set up an LLC and you own it, you're called a member. This is telling you that if you're a beneficiary in a trust, you have all the same protections that a shareholder can expect in a corporation or a member can expect in a limited liability company. What does that mean? It means that if something goes wrong with the property, the assets that are held inside of there, you're not personally liable. You have no liability. It's only the trust. Now, in a trust, as I'm going to get into, it has a trustee as well that controls it. And as you can see here in subsection B of the statute, it says trustee, when acting in that capacity, shall not be liable to anyone other than the trust or the beneficiaries. Meaning that, hey, a trustee of a trust answers to the beneficiary. So if the trustee goes off the reservation and tries to do some stuff it shouldn't be doing, beneficiaries can sue the trustee and hold them liable. But hey, I'm going to show you a situation where you can be the own trustee of your own trust. And if you want to sue yourself, just call Anderson. We'll represent you on both sides and we'll then legally be able to double bill you. So the Wyoming statute, it's really tight. It's very similar to the Delaware statute. I think when we put this together, they looked at Delaware's law and they decided, hey, we got to create something and get in on this as well. So they built their statute, but they made a one tweak to it, which I find to be more favorable, especially in situations where we're not talking about syndicating. So the Delaware Trust is all about syndications. What I want to explain to you is that using this tool, this is so you can hold your own personal real estate, protect your own brokerage accounts, things like that. So the other thing about it, which is the most intriguing aspect for individuals, is that in California, for instance, there's no franchise tax. That's it. So a trust can be set up in California, typically be set up as a disregarded entity, which means that it's going to get an EIN, as I'll explain, and it's not subject to the franchise tax. I mean, if you wanted to verify this, you can look in the Revenue and Tax Code of California. You go to 2303B 2B subsection 3, and it states this, that the trust, which is, saying as long as it has the same classification entity for federal tax purposes, if it's an eligible business entity, which the trust is, and it's disregarded for federal tax purposes, then that business entity shall be disregarded for purposes of this Part 10, which deals with that franchise tax. And if you don't see it on here because I cut off some of the additional language. It speaks to also that LLCs are not. So the California Revenue and Tax Code recognizes that if you're not an LLC, if you set up an entity that's disregarded, which is the way we set up most of our structure, so we don't have to file individual tax returns. We want asset protection for them, but we're not having to set them up. That example I showed you earlier of all those little red boxes, typically none of those red boxes would have to file a tax return because it would be a disregarded entity. It means it flows right down to the owner. Then it's not subject to that $800 franchise tax. The only tax that gets paid is at the individual owner level. So what are the requirements to create this type of protection, this tool? Well, number one, you have to have a Wyoming registered agent. So it's just like setting up an LLC in Wyoming. You got to have a Wyoming registered agent. You have to have a Wyoming mailing address. You got to have an office address in Wyoming. And you can have to have at least one or more trustees, one of which should be a recommendation. It's not required under the Wyoming statute. One should be a Wyoming trustee. I'll show you what you can do there in a minute. You gotta have to have a certificate of formation. This is like your articles of organization that gets filed with the state. You put together a trust agreement. And once you've done this, of course, you have your trust set up. So how about I show you now how this is done and what we're gonna do. So what I'm gonna do now is I'm gonna switch to a whiteboard, and I'm gonna start drawing out some various ways you can benefit from this type of tool, and visually how it gets created and how we've been setting these things up here. If my program comes up, all right, let's try this one more time. It was working before we started, but then it stopped.
You can blame me for that, Clint. That's how it goes.
No, it's just technology. You know, whenever you want it to work for you, it senses that, and so it wants to work.
Yep.
All right, so here's what we do. Here's how Wyoming Statutory Trust works. We set up this trust agreement here in Wyoming. So we're going to create this Wyoming Statutory Trust. Now, you need to have a trustee and a beneficiary. That's what's required under the statute. So you come up with a name for your trust. We register the name with the state on the certificate of formation. And you always have to include the name statutory trust in the name. Just like with an LLC, you have to include the words limited liability company or LLC. So if I wanted to call this the Purple Juice Statutory Trust, that's what I would file it as. All right. And then I'm going to need a trustee. So it's best to have a Wyoming trustee. Now, before you start wondering, well, Clint, I don't know a trust company in Wyoming that can be my trustee. Statute doesn't require that. You can set up your own limited liability company to be the trustee. So you set up an LLC as your trustee. So this is your trustee LLC. It's an LLC that we set up, and it has certain provisions in there to make it a trustee of trust. So this would be you, and you're the manager of this entity. Now, if you're familiar with, and you're the member, if you're familiar with Wyoming limited liability companies, one of the reasons why people like to set these entities up in Wyoming is because Wyoming doesn't collect any information on who the managers are or who the members are. It's all completely private. The only thing you need to disclose when you're setting up a Wyoming limited liability company is the organizer, the registered agent, and the business address in Wyoming. That's it. And of course, the name. No other information is collected when you set up this entity. So typically what we'll do is we'll set up a Wyoming LLC. Now, it could be a corporation as well, but for the most part, I like to use LLCs here. And so we make this LLC that you own and control the trustee of your trust. So this is the trustee. Now that's important because whenever you take title to assets in the name of the trust, you're going to take title with the name of the trustee. So if this was OB1 LLC, then if I was going to put a piece of property into this trust, I would title it as follows: OB1 LLC, trustee of the Purple Juice Statutory Trust. Okay, that's what's going to show up on title. Your name doesn't appear anywhere there. So you get this anonymity by using this structure. It is really simple to create. So people don't even know that you have the assets, number one. That is a huge benefit. Now, the other thing about the trust that's interesting with this statute is that it allows you to have multiple trustees. Now, this is important to grasp this, because when you file for your trust, a trustee has to sign the certification. So if your name, let's say this is Tom right here. If Tom runs the LLC, when that certification is submitted to create this trust, then Tom Thumb is going to sign on the line and that's going to blow the anonymity. So I think the drafters of the statute realized that it poses issues for people. So what they came up with is they said, your trust can have multiple trustees associated with it with varying powers over the trust document. So normally people think, well, if I'm a trustee, then I have control over the entire document. No, not at all. You can set it up where you have one trustee. You could say, hey, listen, your job as trustee is to pull staples out of pieces of paper that come in. Yours over there is to lick stamps. So just sit over there. Whenever we get a piece of mail we need to send out, you get to lick the stamp, and that's the only control you have. Well, the way we set it up is that you make me your stamp licker. So you've named Clint as a signatory trustee is the way we create our trust. And so I'm the one who signs the certification. So I sign it, Clint Coons, signatory trustee. And in the trust document, it states that Clint Coons Esquire, okay, is only allowed to sign certifications of trust to register this trust in the state of Wyoming and any other state where it intends to conduct business or hold assets. So this is what we do. It's similar to how we've created land trusts before. I don't know if we've ever set up a land trust for anyone on here before where I sign as the trustee. I'm on thousands of trusts across this country where I'm listed as a trustee for title holding purposes only to protect our clients' anonymity. So for anonymity of ownership of real estate is what we'll do. And they transfer assets into my name. I resign. My client becomes a trustee and no one knows. And they think I own the property. I receive calls every week from investors trying to, hey, you want to buy, I'm interested in your property. You thinking about selling? Because they track me down through the internet and they think that I own this stuff. I don't. But for purposes of the trust, I get listed as trustee. So as a signatory trustee, so I sign the certification. So you have Clint on there for public purposes. So that's all they see. But on the certification, here's what's neat about it. OB1 gets listed. So it says OB1 LLC trustee. And then at the bottom, it says Clint Coons signatory trustee. So no one from OB1 has to put their name on the document. So it gives complete privacy. The beneficiaries are our clients down here. So you would be the beneficiaries of this trust. And the beneficiaries, of course, get all the benefit of having it. So this is essentially how a Wyoming statutory trust is created. I mean, there's some moving parts here. But the benefit is that once you've set it up now, you have anonymity. You apply, or we apply, when we set these up, to the Internal Revenue Service to obtain an EIN number. So we get an EIN for it, and we let the service know that we're going to treat it as a disregarded entity. We'll call that DE, or we could do a partnership. Most of the time, we're going to set these up as disregarded entities for our clients. And then what we're going to do is put some real estate into them. So here's the trust that's been set up. Client has a house, and formally, they would be thinking about putting it into a limited liability company. Now they're going to put their property directly into their Wyoming statutory trust. So it'll be deeded in there into the trustee's name, which is you, your LLC. So your LLC, trustee of this trust, it goes in. Now, if anything were to happen with this trust, the way the trust is set up is that all the liabilities stay contained inside of here. The beneficiaries, as I showed you earlier, you're protected. I couldn't hear what. Don't need Siri. You're protected from the claims of creditors against this trust. The trustee, which is your LLC, that's also protected. But even if say someone's able to drag the trustee in, it doesn't matter because the trustee doesn't really have any assets anyways. It's just the trustee. So you have protection at the trustee level and the beneficiary level via statute. So that's how the trust works, just like this from an asset protection standpoint. It protects your properties. Now, there's one thing I need to bring up, and that is this. If you're familiar with limited liability companies, we always talk about them with providing two forms of asset protection. One form is called inside protection, and the other form is called outside. And the difference is that I've been showing you inside protection. Here's a really easy way to think about this, right? You know that mantra in Vegas, what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. Well, what happens in the box stays in the box. That's inside. What happens in there stays in there. with LLCs often tell people, okay, now let's switch our focus. Let's look at the outside. That means you're going to be sued personally. Someone's coming after you because of a car accident or something your kids did, and they did something stupid. Now you're being sued individually and a judgment's entered against you. Well, with limited liability companies in states like Wyoming, you have charging order protections. California doesn't offer them. A lot of states don't offer these types of protections. But what a charging order means is that if I have a judgment against you, I can't take your LLC from you. That's what we mean by charging order. That's why I say what happens outside of the box stays outside of the box. So if you have boxes set up with real estate LLCs, they can't take this box from you. You still get to keep it, run it, and collect the income off of it. Well, you don't take a distribution. There's other ways, and we can talk about that at the summit. But fact of the matter is, you've protected your real estate from your personal creditors. So 2 forms of protection. Well, this is a problem with the statutory trust because even, I showed you that statute. What was missing in the statute when they drafted it was charging order protections. They don't allow, it's silent on that. So conceivably, this could happen. If you get sued as an individual, then they could take your trust from you. Okay. Well, that doesn't make me feel good, right? Now, I could easily fix that scenario, and I could do this. I could create multiple statutory trusts, like so, and have them all held by an LLC, just like this. Similar to those red boxes I showed you earlier. Great, you could do this, set up this structure. If you live in California, you have to pay $800 on this one LLC here. But now you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 properties you're protecting. If each of those properties were in LLCs, you'd be paying $4,800. What's that? Is that right? Dollars a year? No, more than that. $5,400. Whatever that comes out to. $7,200 a year is what you would be paying taxes on. So the point is that you've reduced your taxes on the entity level tax just down to $800 and picked up the charging order. So that's one way to do it. But I operate in the mindset of, hey, if I can get away without paying any franchise tax, why not save an extra $800? So how do you then go from having a trust and giving yourself charging order protections to prevent a creditor from taking the interest from you? Well, when you read the statute states that you can take your trust and you can convert it at any time into a limited liability company. Okay, so you can convert it. So what I did when I drafted our trust is I stated this, that if any time the beneficiaries are involved in litigation, right, and there's a chance that a judgment's going to be entered against them, the trustee of the trust must convert the trust into a limited liability company. It's called a conversion that takes place. In fact, I even have the sample LLC document put in the trust document as an exhibit. And the reason why I set it up this way is so that if anybody challenges my client on the fact that, oh, you just converted into an LLC because you were being sued and that's a fraudulent transfer. No, not at all. I already planned that I may have to convert to an LLC. And in fact, if you look at my trust document, here's the LLC agreement. And it states that if any of the beneficiaries, which I happen to be one, is involved in litigation, the trustee is forced to convert into an LLC. It's out of my hands. I have to. The trust agreement states that this must take place. So this LLC conversion is what allows you to set up a structure. Let's say you're in California again. You can have all 6 owning them in your own name as beneficiaries. You don't have to file any federal tax returns for any of these structures. You don't have to file any California franchise returns. And if somebody came after you, then you could just flip the switch and start banging them all out into limited liability companies, just like that. Now, this provision that I'm describing to you is actually something that is used in all the Delaware statutory trusts as well that are created to hold syndication interest. Delaware statute allows for the same transition. They do it for different purposes. In theirs, it's to protect in the event of bankruptcy or financing. They're allowed to, they can switch to an LLC as the way they structure it. And they have to do that because so many of them are set up for 1031 exchange treatment. They have to include certain language. Well, we're not doing this for 1031 exchange treatment. So I went a different route with drafting the language as to when it's going to convert. Because my main concern for the clients was, hey, if someone's coming after me, I don't want them to be able to take my trust interest. And so if I've set up a structure where a client is the actual member in that trust, I want to make sure we've got our other bases covered as well. So there's a lot of different ways you can protect your assets in using the statutory trust. So let me just show you some ways now in which this tool can be used. Let's say that you own 3 properties. These all 3 are in California, all right? And these are rentals. And you have 2 properties in Georgia. If you wanted to protect all 5 properties and you created 5 limited liability companies, 3 in California and 2 in Georgia, California will hit you with $800 a piece on all of those entities, okay? So you're gonna pay that $4,000 in this particular scenario. Now, I don't wanna do that. So what I could do then is set each of those properties up in separate trusts. And the way we go about this is we set it up in Wyoming. So those would be the 3 there and then 2 Georgia trusts. And all of this would roll back to the client. I'd first set up the trust in Wyoming, and then I would register it in California. No problem. There's a registration certificate registration form we filed, and register it in Georgia as well, the 2 Georgia trusts. And now I have all my properties protected, and I don't have to file any tax returns in California, no franchise returns. I don't have to file any federal returns for this particular type of structure. So the savings comes from not having to file returns and not being taxed on the actual individual entity structure. So that's one way of doing it. Another way of doing the same thing is you could still keep, if you wanted to have a holding LLC here, because you're like, you know, I still like the holding LLC concept and I want to use partnership taxation, then set up a holding LLC in Wyoming. So you have 2 LLCs, you have 1 in Wyoming and 1 acting as your trustee of your trust like this. Then all the income flows down into this Wyoming LLC for tax purposes, and it issues you each a K-1. So if you lived in California, you're going to have 800 here, 800 here, but not through here. And as your structure continues to grow, say you're investing in multiple states, it could be sitting like this, but you only have 2 franchise fees you have to pay the state of California. So you're compliant with their requirements and you've minimized the overall cost of providing yourself this type of asset protection by being able to isolate out all the assets without all of those ongoing fees that are associated with limited liability companies. So this would be somebody who's, has existing properties in their own name or getting started. What I see a lot more of now that we've been doing work on is we have people that will come to us and they have a structure set up. Maybe they set up actually orange, they have a corporation set up. I see a lot of S Corps. They're LLCs, taxed as S Corps. And they have many properties like this, all through LLCs, all owned by their S Corp. And these are all California LLCs. So if you're sitting here watching this and you're in this scenario, you have multiple LLCs that you set up in California and you're tired of paying that $800, all we have to do is wipe this out, take all of these LLCs here, convert them all over to trusts like this, and then now you're going to be saving $4,000 a year going forwards. See how simple that was? Just convert the form out, shut the LLC down, first put the property into a trust, shut the LLC down. Trust is the owned by the S Corp now, and you're no longer having to pay tax. Another scenario where it has its uses. Let's say you flip property. And so one of the structures we talk about for people who flip, you're going to have a corp down here. This is what we call your flip corp. And we would tell people, all right, you need to set up an LLC. to do your flips. Or, in California, a lot of times we would use a disregarded LP or just a limited partnership as well, owned by the California Corp. Well, the problem for people who flip properties in California is that those are big money flips many times. So if you're flipping property out of an LLC here and the gross income, like I said earlier, is $1 million, you're paying $6,000 on that flip. And then you're coming down here and you're being taxed on the rest of it at 8.84%. If it's a C Corp on the net income. This is on the gross, this is on the net of what's left. The LP, it's only going to be taxed at $800, and then you're going to pay tax at the net. But I would say create a trust, put it in here, and pay zero tax on anything. And every flip you run through a trust, just in this, like I've shown you here. So there's lots of different uses, especially for California residents, when it comes to structuring their real estate to avoid that franchise fee. Now, I know I focused on California, but if you just look at the state in which you're living in, if you're on here and you're thinking, you know what, it's $700 a year to maintain my LLC, how can I get away from that? And if you need 10 LLCs, so rather than spending $7,000 a year, then look at using a trust. I mean, just think about this. If you're spending right now $4K a year, in 10 years, that's $40,000, right? $80,000 in 20, 120 in 30 years from now. And it just keeps going. That assumes they don't increase the cost to maintain that. Wouldn't it be better just to stop it right here and not have to pay those ongoing fees, especially with the escalations? The states now are going to have huge deficits as a result of COVID and all the money they're spending and giving away. And now they need to recoup it off of someone. Who do they go to recoup it off of typically? Property owners and businesses is what they're going to do. So using a trust is a great way to get out of that and get your assets protected. And I found this is one of the major tools now in our arsenal to protect people, especially with the way we set it up with all of those special provisions inside of it to ensure that if something goes wrong, it has ways to automatically step in and protect you. Now, one of the questions that comes up a lot is, what is the investment to get it started? Well, what you're going to need is you need an LLC and you need a statutory trust. And what we can do is we can draft a statutory trust, and we set these up. We set up your Wyoming statutory trust. We do the expedited certificate of formation to get those filed. And then after that's been filed in Wyoming, we turn around and we register it, let's say in California. We do the registrations in California. So now it's there so it can hold title to real estate. We provide anonymity for all of the trust setup. So I provide I'm going to be your signatory trustee. So I'll sign on all the documents that get registered in California, that get registered in Wyoming. So your information is never disclosed. And each year that you have this trust in existence, I will continue to provide that service to you. That's part of what we're doing here. We also register your business with the IRS and obtain an EIN number for you when this is set up. All of these are requirements to get this entity going. And then we prepare trust certificates and that springing LLC operating agreement that I was talking about. So there's a lot of drafting that goes into creating one of these trusts. And if you're probably to go out there on the legal doom, you're not going to find this type of trust agreement available because no one's been putting them together. I mean, they've been used on the large scale of things for so long. Nobody's really thought about, hey, this is something that can help the small investors as well. And so this, I think, is really unique to Anderson. We're probably one of the few firms out there that I know of that are actually putting these together for our clients for real estate investing to protect their assets. Now, the other aspect of this that's necessary is you need to have a Wyoming trustee. And we set those up as well, where for our clients, we give you a choice of an LLC or corporation. So if you want to go down this road and you want to get your first one set up, you're going to need to use an LLC or a corp as your trustee. And keep in mind that trustee can be the trust of all of your statutory trusts. It's just not the one. Maybe you're setting up a land trust for some purpose to protect your personal residence, as I'll talk about at the summit. Well, this one LLC or corp that you create, it's going to be the trustee of all of your various trust documents. And then registration, again, to expedite the articles there, we custom draft this trustee LLC, put together the proper business resolution so it can serve in that capacity. And again, the LLC is going to need an EIN. So we obtain that for you. And then we prepare the unit ledger and send it out. Now, something that comes up a lot here is when we're setting these up, you know, what I've been showing you, the trustee and the trust, people get hung up on the transfer taxes. They wonder, hey, is this going to result in a reassessment of my property tax base? Is it going to result in a transfer tax? Here's the thing, the trust does not. It's exempt from that. That's one of the reasons why people have been using land trusts for so long to protect their assets, is so that they can transfer their property into a land trust, not be reassessed for property taxes, not pay a dock stamp or something like that, and then put the land trust into an LLC. So they're using two structures to get asset protection. My recommendation is, hey, rather than have two, why don't we just condense it down to one? So all you need is just one trust. Rather than a land trust and an LLC, we'll just set it up in a trust, because now we have the ability to get the type of protection that we were seeking through that alternative structure and avoid those taxes. Now, the one thing I would want to mention is that you're in Florida. For Florida residents, if you're on here, it's a little different. In Florida, we would not use this tool. We would use land trust, because land trusts in Florida already provide that type of protection. And if you're thinking, Yoshi, to be using this for your personal residence, you could, but I would still focus on the land trust. I mean, this solution I'm providing you right now, where we create the LLC and then and we create the statutory trust from you, is something that if you're investing in real estate, commercial, residential, this is the structure you want to be creating. It's going to save you thousands of dollars in ongoing fees and costs to administer this type of structure. Now, something else that's necessary to go through with this that we provide is what we call our Wyoming Nexus program. Because when you set up your Wyoming trust, you need to have a business address there. So we provide that to you through our Wyoming Nexus program. So we give you a physical address, we provide mail forwarding. And here's the thing that a lot of people don't realize, and I've seen this mistake happen a lot. They'll set up a trust, and then when they file their preliminary change of ownership form that you have to file with the assessor's office, then they want to know an address for where to send tax statements, they put their home address there, or some address that's traceable back to them. And I'm thinking, well, you just defeated the anonymity by doing that. So what we've set up in our plan is that the trust uses our address in Wyoming, or we use a Nevada address, depending on where we want to send the documents. Tax documents we're going to send in Nevada, so we'll give you a Nevada address for the tax documents. So they all get routed through our office. So with our Nexus program, all property taxes, anything that can tie back to you, comes in Nevada. And this creates a shield. Basically, a wall comes down. So if somebody's looking, they're not going to know who's on the other side of that. It's critical that you tie down all these loose ends when you're setting it up. And not only do we use these trusts just for real estate and to hold assets this way, I use them for brokerage accounts. So if you're a trader and you want to trade in the market and you want asset protection, one of the issues you run into many times is that if you want to set it up in an LLC, the broker wants to charge you higher fees. They're going to say you're a business trader now, a professional trader. Not with a trust, they don't. Trusts are exempt from that. See, not only are they exempt from taxes with the states and transfers, they also work extremely well with brokerage fees. And so when we have people that have brokerage accounts, now what I'm telling them is, hey, don't use the LLC, use the statutory trust so you can still get your real-time feeds without having to pay that extra fee on there. You can run a business through there. We store all your documents for you. We make sure that your trust and your LLCs always maintain compliance so they don't go out of compliance. And if you want to, if you can come to our address in Wyoming, and you can actually utilize our space there to hold meetings. So to set all this up, what you need to do is you need to create a limited liability company. You need to create a statutory trust, and you need to tie it to Wyoming. And what we've done is we've created a package for you. I talked to Don about that. We call it our California Tax Elimination Package. And what it includes is that trust. And that trust, when we were setting them up, they're $3,500 for the first trust that we create. And we also create a trustee entity. We provide you Nexus that goes along with that. So what I was talking about there, so we have a business address, you get your LLC trustee, you receive your Wyoming statutory trust. So the value of this is $8,800 for all of these services. So we draw it all out for you so you understand what you need to put together. Now, whenever we teach one of these events, even though this type of value right here, if you look at how much you could save over the next 5 to 10 years by utilizing these structures, you could save 5, 10, 15 times that just in state filing fees by making that type of investment today. But we're never going to charge you that amount because of the fact that you took an hour out of your evening. And so for being here, and if you want to eliminate the franchise taxes, be able to invest in all 50 states and not have California looking over your shoulder again, then just get your base structure set up. Tonight only, it's actually $29.95. No, guys, it's $49.95 to set this up. It was going to be $29.95. We're just doing the trust, but we decided to throw in that extra limited liability company. So it's $49.95 to set up the California trust, the Wyoming statutory trust, the Wyoming LLC that's going to serve as your trustee, the Nexus program, and the custom blueprint. All that's included for $49.95. So it's $8,800 in value, and we're reducing it down to that. And then here's the thing, because you're going to need multiple trusts, what we're going to do with this, if you take advantage of this tonight and you set this up, I'm also going to include the first deed. So I'm going to include one deed here to transfer any real estate you have. Normally I charge $425 to do the deed. I'm going to throw in the deed. So what we'll do is we'll set up your LLC, the trust, get it registered in California. We'll actually deed your property in as well. All that will be included in this package. So you'll have that base level. And then if you need more, because you've made this initial investment to get the base level set up, and say you need 5, 6 more trusts and you're going to keep investing in real estate, we will take the investment you made and we'll credit that against our unlimited trust package. And we can talk about that one-on-one because we'll have a strategy session to create your blueprint. And so the investment you make tonight will be credited towards creating the unlimited trust package where you can go and you can create multiple statutory trusts, and it's all for just one low fee going forwards. And so you can have the type of asset protection that I was showing you here set up and not have to worry then about what is the ongoing cost, because that becomes the deterrent I've found from people putting together the right asset protection structures. All right, so if you want to take advantage of it, go to the right down here at the very bottom here, I've listed the website address. If you just go to that website address right now, you'll be able to sign up for it. We're going to hold this open for 24 hours. And then it will shut down. The offer will be off. And I'm not going to make this offer at the upcoming summit either. The only way you can get this offer is going to be right here at the summit. We're going to be talking about asset protection. This would not be available to you. So if you see the value of this and the benefit of it, definitely you're going to want to take advantage of it while you're on here. Now, I see there's some questions that came in, and I'm going to burn through some of these for you. So this one, I've seen a few questions they want to know about how do we protect our own home, assuming no rental properties. Home is, location for self-employed business, doesn't receive clients. So here's the deal. If you have your own home and you want protection, you're limited on what you can do, because you can't stick it into a corporation or an LLC, because then you're going to jeopardize your 121 capital gains exclusion. So you're going to want to use a trust for that. Now, could you use the statutory trust? You could stick it in the statutory trust, but I think it's stronger than utilizing a land trust, because you can set it up so that it's disregarded. So you still get your capital gains exclusion if something were to if you want to sell your personal residence, but at the same time, it's a trust. So you're holding it for yourself to live in, and it's not a business entity in the classic sense that people look at it. So I think you would step up the asset protection and make it very difficult for a potential creditor, to try to levy on your assets. Number one, if you got a judgment against you, levy on your personal residence. If they file the judgment, it's not going to stick. B, it's basically make them go away, is the way I look at it. Does it work for Texas? Absolutely. This structure works in Texas. You can set it up there. That's funny you bring that up, Daniel, because I was dealing with this with another client with a trust in Texas not too long ago, and they were trying to refi property, and the broker on the loan said, "Hey, these types of trusts aren't recognized in Texas." And I said, "Oh, the heck, they're not." And I sent him over the law that states that these types of trusts are recognized in Texas. The Texas doesn't have a statute for them, but they recognize foreign trusts in Texas that are set up this way. And then the attorney finally came clean and said, "Listen, we know they're recognized. We just can't sell the note. So if we did a refi in the trust name, we couldn't sell that to Freddie Fannie because this is a Freddie Fannie conforming loan. And so our standard answers are not recognized. In reality, we know they are. We just can't do the mortgage this way." So that's what you run into a lot. Susan, do all states recognize or allow the statutory trust when purchasing real estate? Yes, you can use the statutory trust in all 50 states to set this up. The question always comes down is whether or not it needs to register. So we've done all the research in all 50 states. We know whether or not we need to file a registration in that state. Some states are not required. All right, Teresa, can a property located in California produces no income, a home at the life estate that is held in a Washington LLC, be put into a Washington statutory trust that is in the long-term lease land? You know what, Teresa? That question that you asked me, it's a little too complicated to answer here. I would just say this, that if there's a life estate on there, you can definitely transfer the property. You could take it out of the LLC. You could put it into a trust. Life estate is going to run with it. The lease, everything else associated with that, I mean, without knowing more, will stay in effect, even though it's held inside of a trust document. Ben wants to know, what if you already have an LLC established? How will it work if you don't do business in California as well? That's fine. Your existing LLC that you've established, Ben, maybe that becomes your LLC here, the trustee LLC. We use it as a trustee. And then in that case, what I would do is provide you 2 statutory trusts. If you don't need the LLC because we already set up a Wyoming LLC for you, then what we'll do is we'll substitute out the LLC for an additional statutory trust in this package. So we talked about that. What's the difference between a statutory trust and a land trust? Well, a land trust doesn't offer any asset protection except in Florida. And when you're in Florida, the statutory trust and the land trust are very similar in nature. There are some exceptions with regards to if you get sued personally, you can't convert the land trust into an LLC like you can a Wyoming statutory trust to pick up those outside protections. So land trusts are great. Eric, you said, does Nevada and Wisconsin have beneficial land trusts or land trusts? Land trusts in those 2 states are going to be via state, or not statute, but via case law. And all states recognize the trust. And what happens if they don't recognize, if you're using a land trust in one of those states and they'll say the beneficiaries are liable? Well, we don't care. They're going to be liable anyways. And that's, if you're using a land trust, it's going to be your LLC. That's why you partner with that. So to get around that, you go with a statutory trust and you don't have to worry about that anymore. Maria wants to know, what if Anderson already set up a Wyoming Corp and will be setting up an LLC? Well, you know, going forwards, if we could take those existing entities and we could incorporate them into these statutory trusts for you, the way that I was showing you. So they would work. So I talked about land trust for personal residence. Let me see. What is the best way to hold multiple brokerage accounts if you live in Missouri? Well, one of the things you could do, if you want to be an active trader, then I would use a statutory trust. If you're not an active trader and you just sit back and you don't need to have real-time feeds, then you could use a limited liability company. But if you want to get those active trades and those feeds going, the trust is going to be the better way to go, because you're not going to get hit with those higher exchange fees that many brokers charge now. So are you able to register a company that's already established in another state, say Florida? Yeah, you can register another company in a different state. There's no problem with that. So we talked about protecting your own home a little bit. And when you come to the summit, I'm going to go into the own home, give you some different ways to protect your residents as well. There's other strategies that we can use. Will property taxes be reassessed, Sarah asked. No, they won't in California when you move them into the trust. Jesse says one of the main benefits of having assets in a statutory trust versus a Wyoming LLC for protection is tax benefits, disregarded entity. That's it, Jesse, you got it. Disregarded, and you don't have any franchise taxes with the statutory trust. So if you have both safe assets and dangerous assets, should you put them in separate trusts? Absolutely. You do not want to put them in the same trust. Now, if you're from Pennsylvania, you could use this trust in Pennsylvania, but the thing about it is that you cannot deed your property in or record the deed. You deed your property, but you don't record it in Pennsylvania, because if you record it, you're going to get hit with an assessment on it. And in that case, what I would say is, between the cost, you're going to save on the LLC fees in Pennsylvania by not going with the statutory trust over the LLC, but you're not going to have the anonymity because you can't record it without paying a tax. Yeah, so in Florida, land trusts provide asset protection. So here's a good question. Clint, can you please say if a Wyoming statutory trust would work for a California resident wanting to hold an online business in an entity and not have to pay the $800 fee? Well, I can say that. If you don't treat it as a corporation, if you're going to set it up and you're going to have it disregarded to begin with, then you wouldn't have to pay the $800 fee to have that entity in place. But if it's going to be an active business, I would say we have a conversation, because you might be better off electing corporation tax treatment. If you go to corporation tax treatment in California, they're still going to tax a trust at the corporate rates. So you may be better off just setting up a corporation than going to the trust for an active business. So this isn't something that's going to work in all situations. Understand that. How does this trust work when you purchase real estate and the bank holds a loan on the property? It's not a big deal when you transfer it in. It's just you're not going to be able to refi or get a loan in the trust typically unless you're working with a community lender who's not going to make it a Freddie Fannie conforming loan because they plan to sell it to Freddie Fannie after they write the loan. So as long as they're not doing that, it's not an issue. Let me go back up here. What app am I using to write on the screen? I use an iPad, and I use Flow is what it's called for the drawing. Yeah, it's called Flow for all the drawing. I get that question every time. So someone wants to know, is a statutory trust better than a land trust? Absolutely. Land trusts, with the exception of Florida, do not offer any asset protection. What is the best for Tennessee property, a statutory trust or a regular land trust? Well, Gigi, it's best to use a statutory trust because the land trust isn't going to protect you if that's all you're doing. What about if we already have a land trust, an LLC, and a holding LLC and live in California, already set up by Anderson? Well, I would say, going forwards, as you're starting to acquire more property, I mean, that works, but it's not the cleanest way to do it. Going forwards, now that we have the statutory trust, and this is something we've been looking at for over a year and developing it to make sure that it would be able to work in the way we've described. So that's why we haven't talked about it sooner, and just, laws change, strategies change. And that's why you come back to the summit, you come to webinars like this. As Don stated, not everything's static. Most is static when it comes to business entities, but strategies do change over time. So what I would suggest, since we've already created a base structure, we work off of that base structure to build your future real estate investing around. That's a long one. Let me just check this other one here. Question for you. If you're no longer available, you passed on, what happens to you being the signatory? Oh, so if I die, what happens to me being the signatory? Well, here's a great thing. You, as a trustee of your trust, you can appoint anybody you want as a signatory trustee. I serve at your pleasure. I have no control over the trust document other than just to sign the annual filings. It's similar to my position in a land trust where I'm there just to sign or purposes of holding title, for title holding purposes only. That's the way the trust is set up. And like in the land trust, the beneficiaries can replace me if I don't resign. In the statutory trust, the trustee can replace me, or the beneficiaries can as well, for that matter. So if you need to change it, you don't actually change the trust document. It's just an additional form that states this trustee is no longer serving, and we now appoint XYZ trustee, and XYZ trustee agrees to be bound by the trust agreement. So you don't have to actually change your trust documents to do this. All right, we talked about land trusts already. We talked about protecting your brokerage account. So let me go down here. Do we pay property taxes, insurance, HOA fees, statutory trust bank account? Yes. Get a trust account set up. You can pay it through your trust account. So you can go to the bank, open up an account in the name of the trust. Many of you may have already done this with a living trust. You bring down your trust agreement, you establish an account, then you can write checks just like you would out of a limited liability company. So it's run the same way. Okay, great. Did that. Would you set up a bank account as signatory to keep anonymity? Heck no. I would never be a signatory on anyone's bank account for their trust. You would have to do it. And when you talk about anonymity, right, you're going to sign checks on behalf of the trust as the LLC. So that's just part of doing it. You're listed as the trustee. It doesn't mean you're the owner, right? So the owner of the trust is the beneficiary. Your company is the trustee of the trust. So trustees don't own it. So that's not tying it back to you. With a statutory trust, the setup of the brokerage account for active day trading, should the statutory trust be part or 100% owned by a C Corp? Well, that's something you want to talk about one-on-one. You may want to have it owned by the C Corp, depending on the type of trading you're getting involved with, or you would have it treated as a partnership with the C Corp owning a portion of it. So that would then flow down onto the C Corporation's return. So you want to look at that one on an individual basis. All right. Investment amount. If you live in California and you're already titanium, and Anderson blood runs in my veins, that's great. We've set you up with a corp, some S corps, LLC, self-directed. Yeah, John. With that, we do have a way for you to upgrade into the trust, to do some of those on the side. You just have to contact us one-on-one and talk about that. I appreciate that for being a client. When using a statutory trust for a brokerage account, you have no liability risk. And Patrick's asking, and statutory trusts are not protecting from outside liability. If you need to add an LLC as a beneficiary for outside liability, then the broker will charge you professional fees. Not at all. So here's what happens. Normally when we set up a structure for a trader, we set up a personal property trust owned by an LLC for asset protection. Now what I'm saying is set up a Wyoming statutory trust, so it's only one entity you're working with. And if you need that outside protection, it converts to an LLC through the conversion process that's already built into the trust. So that's why I would use it on the trading side, so that you minimize the number of boxes you're having to create. Do ambulance chasing lawyers check the previous county docs that has the owner's name and attempt to strong arm the owner? Very rarely does that ever occur. And if it does occur, it doesn't mean that you're the owner of that property, because it's been transferred into a trust in the name of a trustee. It's not you. And I know a lot of attorneys, I've been through this with our clients, they perform asset searches and they don't even know what's right in front of them many times, because if they knew where to look, they might be able to find some of the answers, but they don't. So does a Wyoming statutory trust also have the same anonymity as a Wyoming LLC? If it's set up the right way, it does. Kenneth wants to know, approaching retirement with much of my retirement funds tied up in personal use, non-rental commercial buildings. How do I structure sales to minimize capital gains and other taxes? Kenneth, that's a one-on-one answer. That's beyond, I'm sorry, this event. So we won't be able to get into that. And can we set up the same format of a structure that you outlined for a statutory trust for a Florida land trust structure? Yeah, Gigi. So in Florida, it's different. We're going to use land trust into an LLC in Florida. It would make more sense in that particular jurisdiction. Again, this isn't right for everyone. All right. This has its uses, but not in all situations. Fran wants to know, how does the Wyoming statutory trust convert to a limited liability company? Well, there's language in the LLC that, or the trust, that states that when the beneficiaries are under assault, under duress, that the trustee must convert it. And so Wyoming has a statutory process where the trust can convert into a limited liability company. And so in order for that to happen, we also put in there, I put together an LLC agreement that has charge owner protections and everything that we talk about. And it's an exhibit to the trust. And when you sign the trust, you as the beneficiary agree to be bound by the trust agreement, which states as follows. If you're under duress, the trustee is going to force you to become a member in an LLC. Well, of course, you're forcing yourself. So it's all laid out in there. That's the way it works. And I think it's brilliant the way they put the statute together to allow for that. Who do you contact about the land trust package? Someone's asking, or the Wyoming statutory trust. Contact the person you've been working with at Anderson, your strategist, and then they can help you out. Say you saw me tonight on this event, and they can talk to you about it. All right, guys, we pretty much got through everything here. One last question: if a 1031 exchange, does the Wyoming statutory trust assigned signatory trustee sign the deed? So in a 1031 exchange, when you're doing a 1031 exchange and you're selling the property, the signatory trustee would not sign the deed. That would be signed by the actual LLC, you as a manager of your limited liability company. Now, you could always appoint another person to sign that, but the signatory trustee does not have that capability under the trust document. That's going to be reserved to the trustee, which is the LLC that we set up. And that's intentional. I don't want to be in that position of having that control over your trust. So I'm not going to put myself in that position to do that for you. So, hey, there's a lot that can be accomplished with this, depending on your state. I strongly encourage you to go to the link right there and get signed up for this, because I said, this is not something we're going to be offering at any other events. This is a one-time special offer. We're just rolling this out now. And after this, it is going to be more. So guys, if you want to take advantage of it, that's what you need to do. And by all means, make sure you're at the summit as well, because we got a ton of stuff in store for you there.
Clint, such good information. I learned a lot on this. And I love the way that you've drafted that trust agreement.
Yeah.
It's not fraudulent when you're under duress, because it's already been planned that it's automatically going to convert. The trustee is going to have to do it.
I know.
I love that.
I don't like to say that I want my clients to be sued, but when it does happen, I mean, they walk away. All right. And they don't lose their assets. And this is one of those other ones where I've dealt with this before with a different type of trust. And the attorney thinks, oh, I've got you. You're like, actually, you don't, because you made assumptions and you don't know what's in there until you actually perform discovery. And then, oh, look at your face. How sad is that? So I think it's pretty neat. First time it happens, I'm going to be smiling.
I've spent a lot of years reviewing, and I've reviewed quite a few of your documents, and they are brilliantly drafted. This is not like a LegalZoom or Quicken Family Lawyer or whatever you find off the internet. You've done a really good job drafting your LLCs, your corporations, so people can take advantage of the tax law. It's right in the bylaws. It's right in the operating agreements. It's right in the LLC. I'm impressed. I haven't seen your trust document yet, but it's very well thought out. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
And thank you for giving such a nice discount to our students. I appreciate that.
Good. I hope they realize what they have here, and that you can do a lot with this trust. And it's going to, I think it's going to gain more acceptance, and you're going to see more people now trying to set these up, I think, in the future. once they catch on, they see the benefits. I mean, even when I first started looking into this tool, I didn't realize the depth of trusts out there that were created in all 50 states. I mean, Walmart uses it to own real estate. I mean, I was shocked how this form of business entity, because so many people talk about LLCs and corporations. Those are great, but they're not right for every situation.
You know, when we started this years ago, or at least when I started with it, it was almost exclusively limited partnerships, and then it went to almost exclusively LLCs, and now we're seeing, and business trusts were kind of a thing of the past
Yeah.
by the end of the 70s and 80s, and it's good to see them coming back in with some very unique and very creative language. That's cool for us. So if you're looking at, and now this, if you're looking to do this, it's protectwealth.com / what is it? It's hidden on my
WY
screen.
Trust. WY Trust.
WY Trust. And this will end at tomorrow or tonight. What is it? When does it end?
24 hours.
Okay. So tomorrow night, take advantage of that. If you feel like this can be a blessing in your life and can provide asset protection that you don't currently have and reduce those filing fees. Oh my gosh, that can be a blessing for people in states with high fees. So Kendall, thanks for you and your crew standing by to make sure that we do it right and we don't mess up on technology. We appreciate that. Clint, especially thank you for you and your expertise. Thanks for taking time with our students this evening. We
All right,
appreciate
guys.
it. All right. And Clint, we'll see you in about a week and a half at the 3-day summit. And a lot of our students will see you as well, too.
All
All right.
Take care.
Thanks, Clint. Have a great night.